Ready to go. All right. So I am excited to have you on. I feel like we were just on literally a week ago. We were partying.
Oh my goodness.
Champagne was being, cake. All the
There's
fun
some
stuff was
pop. Yep, the
happening.
champagne was popping. Yes.
The party was going on. So congratulations. So this is the week. The book is out officially this week. And so it's been like a whirlwind. How do you feel? Yeah, the book is out. This book.
Um, it's good. It's funny because people ask, a lot about the writing process, like how long, I've written the book, how long I wanted to write the book. So, I was reflecting on it today actually. It's amazing to say you want to do something and then you make that thing happen. That even though said I wanted to do it, there's always a part of me is like, well, I don't know if it's going to happen.
Mm. Is that
So
a
it's
doubt?
just, huh?
How could you like Superwoman? You're like, I'm gonna do it. Gonna happen. No matter what. But the writing again, when people see the end, because it's different when if we were seeing behind the scene. I think we,
Mhm.
we had a little peek behind the scene in terms of it's coming, the process
Right.
is happening, and then it's
Yeah.
finally here. But I'm sure your process was longer than us watching, on
Right.
social media. But I appreciate you including us in that because it was like we're just waiting for the big day, and then the big day is
Hmm.
almost there, and then it's here, right? Just like
And then
most
it's
things.
here.
One of the things I was happy to accidentally discover was your vision board when after the party. This was like after the party, and you had your vision board with you, and so I know one of the fun questions I had for you was really thinking about was there something you put on your vision board? I don't know if the book was on the vision board that at the time you were like, this is crazy, so wild. And then now it already happened, or perhaps it happened last year,
Yeah.
this year, or more than one, maybe.
Yeah, I know like writing a book has been on the vision board, has been on a goal for a long time. I like to write. I did a lot of writing for work when I worked as a forensic psychologist, but I always wanted this creative outlet. So initially I thought I would write like a fiction novel.
Okay.
And I actually did start writing one at some point, but it's still half written or quarter written.
Okay.
But I put this on the board because I really wanted to like this is something I wanted to do. I knew I could do it. And it had been on my vision board for a few years. And but it was there. It was just there. I was doing a lot of writing for media. So I
Mhm.
would do a lot of writing around mental health for media. So I started kind of honing that skill, writing for a public audience, not like a dissertation, right?
Very different.
Um, and right, very different writing. And then, during the pandemic, a publisher reached out to me. It was a time where they were looking to bring in more Black authors. And I had a couple ideas, but didn't really follow through with that process, with the proposal. And I would have to say I was fortunate to have another publisher reach out to me
Mm.
a few months later, and I'm like, you know what? Like, girl, this is on your vision
Yeah.
board. You have to strike. This
Yes.
is the
Good.
time.
Yes.
So I was like, all right. So I had two ideas. One was around thinking about therapy and working more around destigmatizing psychology. And then one was, okay, I've written this. I've taught these classes for therapists for many years, how to start your private practice. What if I turn that into a book? So
Mm.
I decided to go with that. I wrote a chapter as part of the process. You have to write a full chapter. You have to outline what the book would look like. I was like, oh my goodness, right? So then it's like, it got very real very quickly. But I sent that chapter off and was really positive to get a yes from that. So that started, I would say it's probably been about 2 years between finalizing the contract and then I had started writing, the contract got stalled. I stopped writing. Contract got finalized. I started writing again. But yeah, it's been a process for sure. And as you can imagine, writing while working full time and parenting, it's not like I could go off for a few months and just, sit on an island chair
And do
somewhere
it. That
and
sounds
just
like the
like,
dream.
you know.
That's how it should have been done. You're like, let me just go to my island. and write.
Yeah, yeah. Take 3 months, 6 months off and write. Yeah. But, it's a process, and I'm happy to share that process with others because I think we should all get our stories out there, even if it's published or not. I think it's such a wonderful thing to pass down
Mhm.
through the generations. I know we come from cultures where oral storytelling
Yeah,
um, is how we pass on stories, but I think sometimes those get lost because sometimes our ancestors have experienced traumas they don't want to talk about.
right. Yeah,
But we it's so important, whether it's a cookbook or something, right? I think there's such a powerful thing to pass on toward the next generation.
yeah. And then it's gonna be forever. And I think that's the beauty of the book, even though it took a long time. And there are others where it's like it's in there. They're like one day, and I'm hoping this will inspire them to say, okay, today's the day and make it happen. And I'm sure this was like close to your heart where it's like you're already doing, like you are living the book, right? Like this is the work that
Yeah.
you've been doing. And so and also part of it, the idea of your story. So we're gonna go back in time. We're gonna go back
Mhm.
to May 2024. Is that right?
Mhm.
Yes. So I'm in the audience at the TEDx Roxbury, and you one of the speakers. And so I wasn't sure if that was again another dream that was on the vision board.
It
And
was.
really, okay. And so
When I have hard things, I just put them on my
the
board. I
vision
put it to
board.
the board. I give it to the board.
Yeah, so that was a beautiful moment. I love your story, partly because I felt like a piece of my own story was in yours in terms of, everything that you went through
Mhm.
in terms of even to that may have inspired even the work you continue to do. So share that story a little bit in terms of that message in the TEDx, but it's also something where a lot of, your audience, the readers and others who may not even be therapists have experience, regardless of where they're from.
Yeah, and I talked about it in the TED Talk, and I have to say that journey is also what brought me to entrepreneurship and what brought me to this
Mm,
book. So my TED Talk is titled Reclaiming Wellbeing in the Workplace. And really I talk about my journey about being very driven. And I'm an island woman, as you said, right? I'm from the islands, and from very early on is like education, you work hard, you work twice as hard. And so I took that to the next
yeah.
level in my career. And one of the things I talk about is like you get this message about working twice as hard and you put in the work in the workplace, but then you have supervisors or leaders who take advantage of that.
Mhm,
They see you work hard and they take advantage, they exploit that to the nth degree.
mhm,
And so I definitely had those situations where when I stepped into leadership as a Black woman, I was getting all this stuff.
mm.
And I didn't know what, for a long time, I didn't get it because I'm like, I'm just doing my job.
Yeah.
I'm putting in the work. I'm bringing excellence to the work. And I'm like, why are people dissing? Why are people finding ways to like undermine me and
Mhm,
cut me down? And then there was just a moment um, that I realized, and it's coming out of that space, and then hearing other Black women share their stories and seeing some really like tragic stories as well of Black women dying on the job. That I realized, like, oh my God, that's what you are experiencing. I didn't have a name for it.
mhm.
Even as a psychologist, right, Marie?
You didn't do the self-diagnosis and be like, what is this?
Right? It's the environment. The
Yeah.
environment was hostile,
Mm,
was absolutely hostile, and contributed to my own stress level. Pregnant, end up in the emergency room twice. One around my aunt's death, and then once while I was pregnant with my daughter. Luckily, we both made it out of that emergency room alive, but it could have gone a very different direction.
yeah. I mean, I think those stories are more common, even though I think people are starting to share them now. But also the
Mhm.
idea, knowing with all the work you do with mental health, I think that hustle culture is still being glamorized in terms of keep
Mm.
pushing, keep going. And you had two, three wake-up calls. I've had multiples, including this
I'm
year.
sure, yeah, I talk about two. I'm sure there are a few. I
Yeah.
mean, those
Oh,
were very,
yeah.
very real in the hospital. Like, I can't dispute those.
Yeah, yeah. But those were the ones that were probably the most glaring, but there were red flags and little signs, and then
Mhm.
ultimately where we reached sort of like,
Mhm.
boiling
Very good
point, right?
point.
And
Yeah.
so part of it, when you think about it, is there something you would have done differently in terms of really listening to whether it's your body or something you would have done where it's like, okay, the first wake up call was enough to really make a turn and say, okay, am I going to change this and to do it for the long term versus,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would like to think so, but I feel like where people like when you're young, you like think you like above everything.
yeah.
I think there's still it's hard to make change, right? It's hard to make sustainable change. So even now, I'm working at working out more. So I do more working out, I move more. But I go through spurts of that, right? Sometimes you get super busy, there's a deadline, and that goes out the window. So I'm trying to make sure I find my way back.
Mm.
Um, Eating every Sunday we go out to eat for brunch, and it's not always the healthiest things. But during the week, I try to make sure have green leafy vegetables and, eating a balanced meal. And so I think the eating piece and the working out are the biggest pieces, like the movement. But I think also that time for yourself. Like, I think that quality as a parent, as a full-time working mom, finding that time for yourself just to rest and not even be thinking about who needs me right now, who do I need to make sure they're doing that. Like I feel like as parents, as moms, we're always on. And so even taking those moments of pause. And actually in the book I talk about, like in chapter 13, I talk
Mm.
about the well-being of an entrepreneur.
Okay.
And that's seven things that people really think about. Spirituality, movement, your nutrition, your mental space, right? Resting,
Mm.
having a routine that's for you, like that centers you and what you need. And I think I too often I hear moms say like either they say it verbally or in their behaviors that they can't put themselves first,
It can't.
right? They cannot. The family has to come first, and their
Yeah.
duties as a parent come
Yeah.
first.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's also a cultural thing, but it seemed to be very global in terms of even though we're getting the sign that, okay, you cannot, right? Even if you thought at some point you're like, I can do all the things and still be okay. I can sleep on 2 hours and wake up, similar to when you were a student, where you're just like, I can sleep
Mhm.
until 2 and then wake up and still be able to be functional.
Right,
But it's like when you have other people to get ready, then you have to get yourself ready. And then again, you're different. Like years later, it's very different energy level,
right.
right? But you're still thinking like, I'm gonna keep all the things. I'm not gonna leave
Yes.
anything. And again, a lot is being asked of you, especially I think when you were in those spaces where it was traditional in terms of traditional workspaces, whether it was hospitals, the schools, the courts. I mean, you've done a
Mhm.
lot of spaces to me that are like super high
Mhm.
stress,
Mhm.
right? And
Mhm.
fast paced. And a lot of
Mhm.
time we promote that in the when you're doing the interview, like I do really well with, in those environments, but then it catch up to you because
Yeah.
years, I mean, you've been in that field for over 20 years. And so talk a little bit about what really sort of became the seed to build InnoPsych in terms of that experience leading to saying, you
Yeah.
know what, I need to start something myself.
Yeah. Well, I had my private practice on the side for many years when I was working full time at the courts and in the hospital. And so, but it came a point where I'm like, okay, so one, I couldn't do all those things anymore. Like you said, when I was younger, it was easier. Like you bounce back
Yeah.
much easier, much faster. But the bounce back at 40 don't look the same. The all-nighters at 40, yeah,
No,
you go into work, you are not functional. You can't remember
literally.
anything. But you're right. It's like you operate on that mentality for so long, and it's muscle memory. Your body's used to it. But you don't realize in that term weather, you don't realize what your body is needs to endure that schedule. Like what is the toll it takes internally. So for me, I would say what was the straw? I just knew I kind of reached a point where I would say I was aging out of teenager.
Mm.
Like when I was younger, I still love teenagers, but I realized like I was getting less patient with students, and our students needed more. They really needed a lot more from their teachers and from their school personnel. It was just we just saw that just the skills that kids were coming in at high school with. were like still middle school behaviors.
Mhm.
So it took a lot to like really help them kind of launch into high school. So it was getting to be a lot. And I'm like, I can't still do these three things, in the same way anymore. I could feel the toll it was taking on my body. So I'm like, okay, I need to do something different. And actually, my husband and I were going through some struggles, and we were like, okay, let's get some therapy.
Mhm.
And we were looking for therapists. We wanted a therapist of color for couples therapy. We wanted individual therapy. And it was just really awful, the process. And there's no other way to say it. It was just awful. It took a long time. It was hard to find people. The platforms that were out there were not designed by us
Mm.
at all. So I'm like, this is something that I can do. I'd already been thinking about, I needed to make a shift and just trying to figure out what that thing would be. And so I was like, okay, this is it. So I think it was called to me to be a therapist. I think we went through this situation. So, I could see that this was a thing that I could do. And it really felt natural. I think things really just kind of fell into place. I won this award from Citizens Bank that gave me $10,000, and we used that to start off to build a platform and to get some of the visibility around the brand out there. So that was, again, things just kind of fell into place, and that made it easy, but it was still a hard thing to leave something that I had been a part of, had helped to build. For now, at that point, 16, 15 years. So making the decision in my mind, I had made the decision, but I hadn't had the conversation yet. It's like, breaking up with a boyfriend,
The hard,
you're
that's the
like,
one we need to talk to this.
we gotta talk, but I'm like, I don't want to do it. I don't
Yeah.
want to do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's
But
hard
then,
because that work, I think when you work with people and you work with different population, you build relationships over time. So it wasn't like you were there for a year, or even if you were there short term, it's the kind of thing where I think you invested and you care about the people.
yeah,
It's
exactly.
very different
Exactly.
to just up and go and not feel
Yeah.
like,
And that's not how, particularly if you, like you said, you had invested this time. I'm not just gonna be like, peace out, right? Because actually we still work together. I still do work there. I still
yeah,
consult.
yeah.
Uh,
So I think it's great to still think about it. But I think in your mind, sometimes we think we know what we're going to do, but it's really tough to do it. Okay. Yeah. So I get that process you were saying. It's a breakup, but I think because you care, you still have a relationship with these people. So it's not like you're gonna go and you never see them again out in
Absolutely.
the world.
Absolutely.
And so how did
Yeah.
that transition happen where you finally did decide to go?
So yeah, I talked to my supervisor, and I actually had a colleague who was there to support me, and she's like, you got this. And so I did it. She was actually there on Sunday. So I did it. I had the conversation. Of course, it wasn't as hard as I thought, right? Because I had already started doing things, and they kind of knew it would be doing something different. So, and people move on. People have left that job so it wasn't like people never leave, but it was just, again, it was where I grew up professionally. Um, and so I have a love of the place. And so, yeah, so I made the decision to leave. I had the conversation in November. I was also working in a school setting. I didn't want to just leave in the middle of a school year. So I was very thoughtful about what that process would look like. And I also wanted to make sure that we could prepare and have somebody who would take over my role. Just because, again, it's a care that I wanted to give to that position. I wanted to make sure they had time to post a position and could fill that with someone who could step in and do the work.
Yeah.
So it happened, and it wasn't as hard as I imagined it would be. And
Usually in your head, and you know this as the expert. So it's more about like what you're thinking versus what's actually happening. But it's
yeah,
still a hard conversation.
yeah, yeah. So it was good. So we did it, and then November, and then I transitioned in June, and working in a school, it's great because then I had a paycheck through the summer, right? So that was nice. I have like this 3 months off that I wasn't preparing to go back, right? So I could literally have that time off and could think about what my moving into the full-time piece. And also what I did during that time, I did a lot of just cleansing.
Hmm.
I did a lot of cleansing that I didn't necessarily know would have needed, but I did a program called Emotional Emancipation. They work with Black people to really help them center themselves and think about healing. And it was just such a powerful experience. We did it virtually. I just wish it was in person because I
Person.
do a lot of in-person stuff, but it was just the thing I needed. Did a couple other like a program called Qigong infused yoga.
Oh,
I did a lot of things that really helped me cleanse and clear my mind and clear out all the stress and stuff that I had embodied from our lovely students over the 20-year career. So that was a powerful process. And I encourage anyone as you're transitioning out, give yourself a little bit of time if you can, but also think about what do you do in that transition before you jump right into something else. The same way, talk about dating again, right? You don't go from one relationship to the
it's the
next, right?
other.
You do some cleansing, you do some rethinking, you think about
But
what
I
you're going
think
to
it again,
change
it's
up.
hard because it's almost like that concept of idle hands, where it's like we always doing, right? And so part of it is like being still feels uncomfortable, right? Just
Mhm.
like the idea of taking care of yourself. And I know there are people who feel very uncomfortable. Let's say if you had the house to yourself, I don't know what you would do. When was the last time you had the house to yourself? But people still look for things to do versus, you know what, let me go lay down or let me read a book or let me just listen to something that doesn't require this labor. And
Mhm.
I think it is part of our history, part of the programming, part of the culture where you just like I
Mhm.
gotta keep going and undergo and do. And that idea of resting without being
Mhm.
exhausted, I think feels very unnatural. Like probably
Mhm.
most of the time, if you do fall out, it's because you're tired versus like consciously saying, look, let me take a nap or let me take a break or let me just lay down
Mhm.
just because that's what
Yeah.
the body needs and your mind needs, right? Because you have all these thoughts that are still running in there,
Yeah.
even,
Yeah.
while you're sleeping. So I think that time and encouraging people to do it without feeling like it's a break, because part of it is preparing for, right? It's almost like
Right.
the next season or the next chapter is coming, but it's so easy to jump into it and not reflect and think about, okay, what did I
Yeah.
learn from this or what do I want to do? And
Right. What I want to take forward, what I want to leave behind. But I think that as you were saying, I was like, yeah, but we were raised with like messages like idle hand makes devil work, right? So like there's so much deprogramming
yeah,
we have to do.
yeah. And people don't know why they're doing it. And I think that's why, and again, I'm sure you've had more than one job, right, at the time, including, being a parent and
I've never had just one job, Marie. I've
proudly
never had one job.
ever.
I have a bunch of friends who would play the game like, okay, how many jobs you have
I
now?
know. Yeah. But it's the same too, I'm sure, while you were in school, because a lot of people went to school, grad school, the doctoral level, and they do program where they don't allow them to work. And I was just like, I can't even imagine. I
That
can't
was not
even
my
imagine
experience.
what that is because all the things were happening during that time. Like one of the things you said during your TED talk was, I don't know why we have these dates. I don't know if it's a gender what's happening where by 30 you had this plan you were going to
Oh,
get your degree. I was just like, I had the same idea. Like I was like, by 30 this is going to happen. I will be doctor blah blah blah. And then something completely different happened at 30. That was not the degree, right? But you have this date, and I'm just like, where did that come from? Like, why do you feel like you had to have that by 30? Was it 29? I don't even know. But still,
well,
that,
it was a 14, it was like a 15-year-old, like something I'd made up with my friends at 15, but I held on to it.
I,
I think I would say the benefit of it, it helped me be very focused
mhm.
and stay on course for what I wanted to do in my life, right? Because one of the things that I talk about a lot is just my parents trusted me to go overseas, like scraping together their pennies literally to fund this US education that they had not prepared for. So I knew I couldn't just come to the States and play the fool, right?
Like you took it seriously.
I didn't know. I knew what that meant. My dad had borrowed money and, we had a uncle, a cousin who had co-signed on that, right? Like I couldn't let them down.
Right. Yeah.
So it was not an option. So yeah, so I knew what I wanted. So yeah, 15-year-old me
Yep.
decided by 30,
Do it.
I was going to have my PhD, and I did that. You know,
Check off the list. Check. It's done.
check off
Which
the
is
list.
great. I think it's great to have it, but also like there are some people where the plan change. Life
Hmm.
happens, right? And
Absolutely.
so, and to be able to give yourself grace because some things are out of your control. And education is always, always a priority, depending on where you're
Hmm.
from. I mean, other people are like, oh, I'm not gonna go and do it. But again, this was something you decided that was a goal, and luckily your parents were
Hmm.
supportive. But now the idea of combining, even with that education and entrepreneurship, because sometimes they seem to be at odds, right? Where you do have the knowledge, you have the expertise, and it doesn't always translate into like, I'm going to get this high income. And there's a cost, even if you're making that high income. And so, how did the two merge where naturally it seems like you work, and then at the same time, you had the side hustle of having the business, and then eventually becoming a full-time entrepreneur?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I mean, it got to a point where I physically couldn't do it. I couldn't do the two things anymore.
Okay.
Things were starting to really ramp up with the business. Um, during COVID, that also allowed me to see um, this is possible, right? Income wise. I'd been so used to it just being like a side hustle, and the money was great because that would help me, do my vacations and get with a down payment for the house. But now it's like, okay, so now this is going to be my full income that I have to do everything with. That it brought it to a whole different level. And I wanted to make sure that I could do it, right? Again, the self-doubt was there. I don't know why, but it was there, right? And so, it came to a point where I physically couldn't do the two things. So I'm like, all right, this is time. I could see the money coming in, and what I did was I was like, okay, what I will do is I will set aside a certain amount of money. When I get to this number, I will feel comfortable making the leap, making the shift. So that's what happened. So I worked, I made sure I was intentional putting money aside that would build up for my emergency fund. That's going to be my transition money. So I would be like, okay, if anything happened within that first 3 months, I got money I can like pull from.
Which is great. I think a lot of the time, again, similar to the hustle, people make entrepreneurship very glamorous, right? Where
Mm,
things are happening, you're doing a pitch, money come through, like you had some seed money that came through in terms of being able to have that support, but it doesn't always flow so easily. And also
mhm,
when you think of your own life, right? I think you may have had support, but some entrepreneurs may not have, support.
mhm,
But also having family members. I think I was reading that you do have examples of uh, people who had businesses and were doing different things. And so a lot of the time when you've gone to school for a long time, it doesn't equate to knowing how to make money. Like you know how to get a job and have an income, and we are encouraged to get the job or the
mhm,
jobs, right? Because then that's the security one versus even though you were
mhm.
doing it as a side hustle, the doubt is still there, even though again, that little girl is still confident and be like, we're gonna do this. But now it's like, as an adult, there are
Yeah,
pieces,
we're gonna do
right?
this. We're gonna do this.
It's like hopscotch. You're like, are you gonna jump in there? Or you're like, wait, but I think it's great to plan, especially around money. And that's the perfect way to get into the book because I started doing some reading some of the chapters, and it's very detailed in terms of a lot of the time it's more like the feel, the work versus like the specifics, right? To even having a budget. having
Mhm.
things laid out and knowing how to do a P&L. And I'm like, oh my God. And so those are the things I think that can make someone who's not, I said, oh my God, just reading it, because those are important, but I think having samples of what it can look like where people can modify it. And so was it just based on all the experiences you had where you're like, I wish somebody told me this? And so you're like, okay, let me put it in here because you didn't have it when you were
Yeah.
starting out.
Oh my goodness. I know the one of the attorneys on the publisher, she was like, "You're so generous with this book." Yeah, I think that really I wanted when as I was writing this, I had done this course for people, so I really wanted people to like have a one-stop sh shop,
Mm-hmm.
right? That this would be everything. And there's so many things that people don't talk about when you start a business, when you grow a business. And I want people to even think about growing their business from day one, right? And not just piecing it together. Because I think the businesses I saw in my family, it's like they were businesses that people did out of necessity,
Mm-hmm.
right? In the Caribbean, like everybody's an entrepreneur, right? Everybody has a side hustle, right? But I wanted it to be more than I think sometimes Caribbean businesses here in the US get stuck.
Mm-hmm.
They do one thing and then they don't grow. They don't think about, think about one of your favorite restaurants, right? The food is great, but they haven't evolved out of that
One
model.
location my whole life.
Hmm?
I said one location my whole life. It never like there's never like the next. And I think even having that where you, I mean, it's not the same as the vision board, but I think just laying that plan out, I think there's a way to do it where, I mean, again, having you as a guy where it doesn't feel scary, because I think
Yeah.
it's the challenge when you think of making the leap, because I do talk as a non-therapist. I do talk with a lot of um, practitioners who want to, so they work with other people, but just the thought of all the pieces of what's
Hmm.
required, and
Yeah.
even like when I look at your budget, even the insurance, I was like, oh my God, so many pieces like you don't think about. And I can see someone just like their head is just gonna on fire just thinking of all the
The
things. But
things.
I think there's a way where it's like because it's going in pieces, you don't have to think of everything at the same time,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Versus
Yeah.
like knowing, okay, I'm gonna do this and gradually build it. But at the same time,
Absolutely.
I also don't want people to sort of like getting ready to get ready and doing all the fun planning and not really
And
sort of
executing.
there's
Yeah.
certain things that are
Yeah.
happening. I mean, I'm happy I also saw your weekly schedule,
Yeah.
which is
So, yeah.
so that's a way
No,
somebody can follow that.
absolutely. I think it was really about giving information, giving people opportunities I mean, the first half of the book is really about your mindset.
Mhm.
What are the things you need to get ready? Particularly your money relationship, understanding what you're worth, what are your costs, how much are you going to cost, right? Because the ultimate thing is that you're going to pay yourself. And a lot of people start businesses and they don't pay themselves. Then that means your business isn't profitable. You can't, if it doesn't pay you, you're not making a profit.
Mhm.
So you can't say, well, you're making a profit, but you're not getting paid. So I really wanted people to like, there's a lot of stuff that people get into business with a lot of myths and misinformation. And I want to clear that up. Let's be clear about what you need and how you can do this the right way and be profitable,
Yeah.
right? And so it does have a lot of tools, and I think people are going to have to read it at least twice,
Oh yeah, no,
right?
I'm gonna, because even for me, I'm like, let's get to the, but about you, what shift did you have to make? Because again, sometimes when I think of people who are trained in your field, I feel like you got all the tools, right? And so,
Mm-mm.
so what shift, even though you were a trained professional,
Yeah.
right? What did you have to make a shift around?
So like you said at the beginning, this book is about lots of the lessons that I learned.
Mhm.
And so I would say chapter 2, where I talk about think and act like an entrepreneur,
Mm.
like I was scared to go full time. I was scared. I had all those myths. I have like some cognitive distortions on like confronting the fear on page 28 and 29.
Okay.
Fear, let me see. I'll take my glasses off. If I start a business, it will fail. I can't do it. Entrepreneurship is too hard. This one, my business won't make enough money to cover my lifestyle. I think that was
Mm.
the biggest thing. And so there's just a lot of fears and doubts that people have. And so I
Yeah.
think for me, that was the biggest one.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, there's so many Maries. Chapter 3 is about money. That whole the money
That relationship.
mindset thing,
Yes.
my relationship with money, like unpack that was a type of brain exploding.
Yes.
When I started to do that work, I'm like, oh my goodness, I didn't realize I thought I knew how to save. That was a
Mm.
beautiful lesson to save, but it didn't help me in business because then I was saving money but spending my time doing things that were not in my zone of genius.
Yeah.
So it really about just challenging all the lessons. So I think in every chapter there's something that I
There's
learned.
something.
The one on personal branding,
Yes.
I didn't realize that I needed to see myself as a brand, even in the workplace. So I think some of these things, even if you're not an entrepreneur, they can help you, right? In your career, like your personal life, like the whole money stuff, personal, every one of us should have a class on like,
Understand. Well, you also
right?
talk about wealth building, right? So not just about saving, because we do grow up learning about save your money,
Mm-hmm.
put things away and so forth, but it's very different than thinking about wealth building, but
Mm-hmm.
wealth building within your own business, not
Mm-hmm.
wealth building through the job or multiple
Yeah.
businesses.
Yeah.
Because I think in the beginning, people do a lot of different things, which I think it's okay to do. And I know one of the things people sometimes have a hard time with is like when you have to focus on one, right? The
Mm-hmm.
idea of like,
Mm-hmm.
if this is the bread and butter for now, you
Yeah.
cannot have like just like you had all the multiple jobs and you were able to do them because they were different places.
Mm-hmm.
But technically, one where you just truly
Mm-hmm.
focus and say, this is it, and you're
Mm-hmm.
truly putting all your energy
Yeah.
on that one. So was it hard because you have other interests, you have other
Oh
things
my God, it's still
you
hard. I still
so
feel
you do
like
it.
I'm doing way too many things.
Yeah.
But yes, I'm always trying to like, what is the thing? I try to, they're all in the umbrella of mental health.
Okay.
So helping therapists, helping, but I still get some of my coaches and my mentors say, what is the one thing you're working on? So,
And that's always people are like, I don't want to pick. And on one hand, it's great to sort of know because you can do the other things. But I think setting this up where because you have all the different pieces and the thing sometimes people think is gonna get in the way, it's not the thing, right? So I always see people like, I'm gonna get another certification. Like someone like me,
mhm.
where I'm like, there's always another course. Let's get another,
Yes.
and then you keep doing the thing and studying, being a student, which is
Hmm.
great to be a student for life.
Hmm.
But then it's the doing of the thing that scares you, right? And I think
Right.
that's
It's the
why
avoidance.
having
Yeah.
you having the book and people asking for help in terms of things they don't know, because a lot of the things, honestly, there's no way for them to know, right? And so by acknowledging that, and I think that time in terms of reflecting, like, what do I really know how to do? And which
Hmm.
piece do I need help putting together and not feel like you have to know and do all the things, right? And I think like what do you hear from people when you do your workshop, for example, in terms of what you know your own story, but what truly get in the way of them saying, I can have a private practice or be an entrepreneur and thriving, not just have it and be like, I have a business, but they
Yeah.
really are thriving.
I think really it's just the self-doubt.
Mhm.
There's the mindset things. And that's why having doing this course for about 5 or 6 years, I just saw commonalities among people coming in. They just really needed to build up the confidence. And then it was about just the skill, like how to do it, right? Because we don't get those things in grad school.
Yeah.
But the money mindsets and overcoming the fear. I think those are the two biggest things that people need, hurdles that people need to get over in order to make this happen. And I've seen those transformations in every time I do this course, the transformations that people make, the net worth that, some of the exercises, the net worth, like even calculating your net worth, people are like, oh my goodness, right? I didn't think that was going to be such a big thing, or like pulling all your statements together, like that exercise of just looking at all your bills. I remember one woman, we had her do the budget, and she was like, "Oh my God, I didn't realize how much money I was spending on Amazon." Right? That
Mm.
it just like when you pull stuff together, you just get all these insights that we're going around our day to day, we're not paying attention. So it focuses you to pay attention on where your money's going, but also where you want it to go, right? It gives you information.
But I think also seeing, because just like in therapy and looking for someone who reflect. who you are and so forth, it's very similar in terms of seeing therapists of color or entrepreneurs of color in different fields who are successful, but also
Mhm.
sharing that process and that journey. And I think, I don't know, again, if it's a culture thing, if it's a gender thing, where we don't always share the
Mhm.
story in terms of how you got here. Because a lot of people, it's not always the traditional way. And we see other people take the leap. And I don't know if it was you sharing or some of the stories I was reading where your professors or some other people did not really guide you in that direction in terms of other
Mhm.
people may have been, it's like a given that of course you can have your private practice.
Yes. Yeah.
Whereas
Yeah.
you, perhaps we were mentored or you were mentored very differently, not to see that as an option. It doesn't mean everybody's gonna go for that. And again, I think I always tell people, depending on who they are, it's not an obligation. Like you're still making a choice and deciding, is this for me?
Right.
And the idea that they could have continued just like you in terms of do what they enjoy doing with the
Mhm.
price that they're going to pay by doing all the things and having that. But it's not going to be a full-time
Mhm.
practice, right? They may do maybe something part-time or
Yeah.
collaborate with someone. So what do you say to people where they were just like, I didn't have the mentorship early on? Because I know some other groups do have it, and maybe from grad
Mhm.
school or after a few years working, they don't work 20 years. Like they may have worked
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
3 to 5, and then they're able to have a practice after that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things I really tell therapists, and I think entrepreneurship, like anyone can become an entrepreneur. Anyone, I think we all have that gift to do that. Sometimes we need a little extra push. But I think it's a valuable, for me, it feels like it's financial freedom. It allows me to tap into both my professional knowledge and my lived experience to bring those things together. It gives me a lot of freedom. And so I encourage people to just play around with it and see. And I think for therapists, we need more therapists in the field where they are in a place where they kind of direct their own businesses, serving clients that we don't get to serve. I think a lot of, therapists, they're working for an organization and then they're at the mercy of that organization in terms of, you know, who they get to see. So it can give you a lot of freedom in that way. And I also say, like, you want to always diversify your revenue. So you're not going to just be seeing clients, right? I think you can get burnt out from that. So developing a consulting practice, there are other ways that you can use what you know.
Interview.
I did a talk recently at my just on the other day at my library, and there's a psychology student. He's, I think, postdoc, and he just texted me. He's like, "I've been thinking about our conversation since then." It's like I can't get it. So like I've sparked this
Yes, yes,
this entrepreneurship piece in someone else, and I love that. So I
yes.
want to help develop that. So I think for I might be rambling a little bit, but for therapists of color, particularly for people of color, I think we've been told in many ways that we're not supposed to be entrepreneurs. And I'm here to tell you that yes, you can. You can become an entrepreneur. You can do it well.
Yeah. And the skills are there. And I think that's the other thing I noticed in the work. And this is across multiple fields where most of these individuals are overqualified, overeducated, have more than enough experience to do it. And the rest of it is anyone, whoever you are, you would have to still figure it out. So it's not something where because
Mhm.
it's you that, oh, I don't have this, but it's something you learn in the business. Like I'm sure once you start the business, there were certain things, there's no way, as much of a planner you are and having all your dots
Mhm. Mhm.
connected, there were things that you didn't know until you started the business and then you're in
Mhm.
it and meeting other people. The
Yeah.
part that may surprise people, I think, is the branding piece, because I know a lot of people would say they don't like being on. Like one of the things I noticed, whether you enjoying it or not, is being visible, being on social media, sharing what you're doing and having the tips and connecting it with what's going on, whether it's in the community, nationally, and just know how do you like, is it something where you learn and we're like, how do I do that in terms of having that brand? Or is it something you had before you officially start the business? Because that's a piece most people don't want to do. Like even doing this interview would have been like, I don't want to be on, just talk about the book when the book come out. And then they'd
Yeah,
be
oh my God.
out.
It's so funny. I love that question because I always go back to childhood Charmaine, right? Like I was super shy, didn't say a lot, observed a lot though.
Mm-hmm.
And so I could never like her little Charmaine, teenage Charmaine would never maybe envision herself in these kind of spaces. So I did the partnership in 2009. This was a program that helps leaders of professionals of color advance in their organization. So I did that early in my career. And there's this woman was talking. There was one of the modules, one of the sessions was about personal branding. And that conversation just blew my mind. It really was about understanding yourself as a brand
Mm-hmm.
and how you talk about your skills and your accomplishments so that your supervisors know what you do and can help to promote you and help to advance you in the organization. And that was one that I really stuck with me because it was like, oh, I had approached it with like, you should see what I'm doing. You should know what I'm doing. Plus, the other thing was I was trained where you don't talk about yourself like that. You don't brag about what you do, right? Culturally. And so keeping quiet about my accomplishments was in line culturally, but was out of place at organizations where if you don't speak up, you get overlooked. And so that was a big, eye opener for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's how I started the course. One of my mentors invited me to come in and talk to some interns, and I decided I was going to share this thing about personal branding because it was such a big thing for me. And so when I did it with them, for that the same thing, everybody was just like, "Oh my God!" It was just such a powerful
Yeah.
conversation and learning. And so I did that for like 10 years. And then that evolved into the private practice course. But I think there are these things in which I think, particularly for therapists of color, what I saw was our cultural upbringing was in conflict with workplace values. Like they didn't match up.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're often overlooked for stuff. And I would feel resentful sometimes. I'm like, how come I didn't get that opportunity? And I realized I wasn't trained how to navigate white spaces.
Well, the thing is, I think part of it too is like being a worker, and I think a lot of the time, many of us face it, and I think we'll continue to face it partly because you're thinking like, if I put my head down and do the work, and the thing is, people are doing the work, but I think it's a twofold. It's not really like advocating for self because I have witnessed over the years people get opportunities from those who see themselves in that person. And so
Hmm.
sometimes mentorship is offered. Like you don't
Hmm.
need to go to a
Hmm.
person and say, "Hey, I'm looking for a mentor, I'm looking
Hmm.
for
Hmm.
this."
Hmm.
You see who's being mentored and you see who's literally helping you navigate when you get there. It's
Hmm.
not up to you to sort of figure out how to, because every space is new when you get started. So until, because you're so observant, you watch and be like, maybe I should be doing this, or maybe somebody else say it to you. But in some environments, those who are in position of power do take certain people under their wings, right? And so
Right. And the people
people, yeah,
often don't look like us.
quite,
Sometimes they
yeah.
do, but I think you have to learn. There's a language of work. White spaces, workspaces
Mhm.
that I didn't learn because my
Yeah,
parents didn't grow up here.
right.
So I observed a lot. So I took in stuff and then some was mentoring, but it was just like, so I knew this was something I needed to teach other people too. It's like, here's how you move through these spaces
Good.
if you
Yeah,
want to get ahead.
yeah,
So
and it's ongoing too. So I think a lot of the time it's more like we're thinking if we do the work, and I think people work hard. It's just a question of people don't see it in us. And so part of the taking advantage is like you will be given more responsibilities, but you will not be rewarded, promoted, and compensated accordingly. But I
yeah,
think because of the hard work, you're more likely to be the one to be given more cases, more. You're doing more. And then I think,
but kept at that level, right? Because
yeah,
you're the worker. You're like
right.
worker B. So you
And so
kept
you think like they're
worker
gonna
B.
see that I'm doing. They, of course, they're gonna see, right? You don't have
Hmm.
to necessarily be,
Hmm.
to advocate. And then you see other people where they may not even be doing as much, right? They're just doing
Right.
just what they
But they
have to.
don't see your leadership. So I think that's the piece, right? How do you show your leadership? That's how you advance.
Yeah, but that has to be
Uh,
learned. But I think
mhm.
also to give people grace, because part of that doubt is also thinking it's my fault, like I should have known. Where if it's a new environment, like where would you, like even in school, for example, it started there where you're not being mentored by your faculty the same way
Absolutely.
as others are, right? And again, the spaces are part of it, the system that we in. And so on one hand, it's like, yes, this is how leadership work. But I, I really would caution for people to take it all on them in terms of it's because of me, I should have done something much more. Yes, we are accountable for that, but also we're working in system that were never meant for us to succeed.
Absolutely.
Even if
Yeah.
you do the thing, even if you advocate, because I've seen people like literally do what we're talking about, and you
Hmm.
can see like they speak
Hmm.
up, they do the thing, they present what they do, they whatever, and they still don't get there. And for
Hmm.
the blame not because it doesn't take much for us to blame ourselves and say, it's me. I should have done more. And I'm like, there is no more. Like, stop
Yeah.
doing
Yeah.
more.
Right.
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 So
Right.
it's a great combination to have. But so with the book, even though it's specifically for therapists, so who should get it? Like, who right now is like, this is for you? And I'm always encouraging people also the gifting part where it's like, you
Mhm.
all won, but we need to really share.
I love that. Yeah, thank you. So I think this book is for therapists, for Black therapists. One, that's the title. But I think it's for BIPOC therapists as well. And I think even if you're not thinking about entrepreneurship, I think a lot of the themes and the topics really speak to just how we kind of advance within your organization. It speaks a lot about some of the challenges that interfere with us moving ahead, career-wise and in entrepreneurship. I wrote it for training directors as well to have an offering for their students because it's something that's often not provided in graduate school. But it's a gift, as you said, that training directors can give to their students on entrepreneurship. I'm looking to, lead courses for graduate schools on this topic, right? Because it's something that's often not a part of the general curriculum, but it could be an additional offering that people will have. Excuse me. I think it's for entrepreneurs who are people who are looking to start a business and really want to think about what are the things I need to do to get ready? What are the mindsets I need to adjust? Um, I think it's valuable for anybody. So you tell me.
Well, it's
But
valuable to me. I think for me, like I learn visually. And
mhm,
so like you, like I observe and I look at things and I see how they're set up. And I love that you do have the samples. There are so many resources, even technology, whether it's like your calendar, whether it's the
mhm.
CRM or the course platform that people may think about, and then graphic design. You have Canva. I live in Canva. And so many different things that people can start tapping into it in terms of how do I use it? And even the idea of social media
Mhm,
and all those different pieces. And so as I'm looking at it, knowing how sometimes we like people go at it alone, they're like, I'm gonna figure it
mhm,
out, right?
mhm,
Versus this is a guide. So
mhm,
is there where do we collaborate and think about like how do we do this more as a collective and learn versus
mhm.
like I'm gonna get the book, I'm gonna do the thing and follow it and thinking like it's a solo.
Yeah, solo journey. Yeah, so I'm planning on creating some group opportunities for that. So thank you for pushing that. We've definitely, like I said, I've done the course. So I wanted to give myself some space to just get the book out there. I didn't understand how much I would need to sell it. So,
Mm.
which is one of my mindsets is selling. So we're doing, working on that. But my goal is to pull together some group opportunities for people to work together, almost like a book club-ish, but very practical and hands-on. Some people, people can also work individually with me. And really, like, we're looking to come to schools and different programs. So if you have a program, whether it's teens or I also think this is a great book for teens as well who are interested in entrepreneurship. So I think I'd love to I think it's a great opportunity to help start conversations about entrepreneurship with a wide range of audiences. And one of the things that I did that I'm going to do on my book talks is really have people ideate. So,
Mm,
like, tell me about a business idea that you've had that you want to kind of think about launching, right? And so, even getting people to play, like, I think that to
mhm.
me, that's such a joyful way to think about entrepreneurship, right? It's like to play with some idea that you have. It could be a big idea, it could be a small idea. But what would it like to execute that? Let's play around with that. So, my goal as I go around the country and hopefully the world, I'll be in Barbados in June, that I get to really engage with people around entrepreneurship and talk about the beauty of it. It is can be stressful, but people actually, entrepreneurs tend to have less stress than people in 9 to 5 jobs.
Right. Yes.
So, and part of that is because we're pursuing purpose, right? That you're doing businesses that you love, that you're passionate about. And so it gives you that freedom and that emotional, I don't know, sensitivity. It's like, but you're following, there's a dream and there's a vision that you're
Yes.
executing. And
Yes.
that gives you back so much. So,
And I think that's part of the vision board, but except you might be doing it live because the idea of beyond the vision board, I think is dreaming aloud when you out there, right? Because a lot of people don't think beyond what they were told to be. And so
mhm,
as adult, you can now still say, I want to be this. And you get to decide and redefine what that is. And I think that's where even the brand came about because I think a lot of people have been doing the
mhm,
work. It's just a question of truly sometimes when you think of it, packaging it. And
mhm,
so the
mhm,
work is there. It's not like they're missing anything. It's just a question of not being able to sort of express it or share it with people the way that it will convert, right? When you think
mhm,
of social media and all these other things. And
mhm,
that's a thing where sometimes, again, it's like because you don't know, it may have to be in that setting with a small group or someone who's been there, right? So
mhm,
you've been there, so you know all the
mhm.
stress and doubt that's going to come up and you can guide them and say okay you can make this happen. And so the people who want to get their hand on the book, where do we go now to be like we want one.
So the book, you can go to Norton, you can go to innopsych.com /private practice, and that'll get you to all things connected to the book. We want you to sign up, so that you can get alerted to all the new things that will be happening with it. My goal is to be around in different cities. I want to do some activations in New York and in DC. And so definitely want you to stay tuned. So connect with us on innopsych.com. Also follow us on Instagram, innopsych, INNOPSYCH. Ask Dr. Charmaine on LinkedIn, on Instagram, and then on LinkedIn, I'm Dr. Charmaine Jackman.
So you're like you are
From everywhere. So the
everywhere.
Black Therapist Guide to Private Practice and Entrepreneurship.
Yeah, and then I was
And
saying to
if you're
people,
local, hit me up and I'll come drop it off to you, sign it and everything too.
I'm in Boston. Yeah, we may have to do like a summer something to be able to share more. But I think, wherever people are at, like when you do find it in terms of sharing with people, because I've told people who are not in the state, so my network is not always where I am.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
when I hear people share certain things, and even like you were saying, anyone, like for me, I'm flipping through in terms of certain things that you
Mhm.
can set up, even the idea of a sample contract, right? Like where sometimes you're like, I don't know where to start, instead of just like
Mhm.
Googling and getting some random things that's not very specific, but you can always modify what's in here, which is great to
Yeah.
see, how that's done. And so, it's only, what are we now? May. So the amount that you've accomplished, even though you're thinking like it took forever, between last May and this May is a lot. And the year is not even over. So beyond making this book on every bookshelf, school program, organizations, like
Yeah.
what's next? What's on the vision board for the rest of the year and the next, I don't even want to say 5, 10, because I know you're a planner, so I'm sure there's a plan somewhere that's
Yeah, you
in
know what?
line.
I have to I have to look at that. So the vision board right now this year is really getting some big publicity around this. I'm thinking Gail King. I
Ooh.
want to be at Essence Wellness House. That's been on my vision board for a few years. So that's something I want to be at Essence. But I think really right now, I've done a lot of creating. So really want to just focus on executing on some of these things, building up the InnoPsych community. We're going to make some transitions with that. So bringing therapists into more of a community, making that community loud and bold. Um, using the book as leverage, building out some courses, some content I've had, excuse me, for a long time. So for me right now, I feel like I want to drill down instead of kind of creating new things and spreading
Mm,
out. I want to kind of drill down into what we have, and so that people know when they come to us, they see all the things that we can offer. One of the things that we're starting to shift the language in is thinking of InnoPsych as a marketplace.
mm,
Where you come to, you have our book, you have our digital courses, you have live events that you could hire us for, right? So we have our shop, we have our affirmation card deck, and we have our very cheeky
mhm.
t-shirts, get you a therapist, right? So you have our directory. So really, I see us as a one-stop shop for anything connected to mental health through the inclusion lens, through communities of color. So that's what I want to amplify. I want to continue to amplify your work. Right now, it's about building out my team
Yeah.
because it's been me doing a lot for a long time. So now it's like, okay, let's build a team so we can do this work well, put some systems in place.
Yes, the system. And that, the things that are not so fun, but are necessary. But again, it's not all you doing it. And that's the part I think still being a role model in terms of still evolving within the business
Mhm.
because it's not going to stay the same as day one when you first started
Yeah,
out. And so there are
yeah.
certain things now where you have the means to have a team because there was a time where like if people are not paying themselves, how are we going to be paying teams? So it's like we
Right?
just need to leave um in that part. But again, seeing you as a role model, and I'm sure you're going to be getting tons of messages to share with people, and then hopefully again, everything is gonna be from the book, right? So sometimes they're like, go read the book. Did you read the book? Because sometimes we can tell somebody did not read the book because the answers are in there. And so they're in there. And so I've flipped through and you can even look in terms of if you're the kind of person, I'm the kind of person who read the instructions after the fact. So I'll go to the appendix.
You're my husband. That's my husband. I'm
What do
like,
I need? Is it in there? I'll go to the chapter that I need the most to
yeah,
work on and then,
yeah.
get into action because I think a lot of the time people are still doing that. So if there's someone out there, the book is there and they're just still in that zone where I'm like, I don't know. What would you say to them? I don't know.
I think that to me, that's the confidence piece.
Mm,
And what I'm just gonna tell you, you got this, right?
got it.
You got this, you can do it. We've all had self-doubt at some part along our journey. It's part of the process, so don't fight it. It is there. But now know that you can do it, right? And take that one step that's going to get you closer, whether it's bringing a friend along saying, hey, can you hold me accountable to this? This is a goal that I have. So bring people along. Don't do this alone, but know that you got this.
You got it. You got it. So I feel confident when I go through it because I don't have to figure it out. I think that's the one thing I think as you get older, where I'm just like, I don't want to figure it out. Maybe like little Charmaine was just like, let me just observe and do. But, I know she would be proud of you. And, I'm grateful that so generous in terms of sharing your story and
Mhm.
sharing your story more with people because sometimes we just see the superpower, like the superwoman out there who doesn't go through anything, never get tired,
No,
and doesn't
no,
need sleep. And
no.
so, practice what's in the book. And so, I appreciate what you're doing and continue to share the work. And so, and then keeping on social media because I think that's the thing for me sometimes seeing not just in the usual spaces that you see people where you get to really see this is what a therapist look like. This is what an entrepreneur look like. It's not what we see sometime on like TV, but
Absolutely.
having that courage because I know you out there and I think a lot of time people wouldn't have known if you remain a secret and did what you were comfortable doing. So
Yeah.
keep up that great work and I look forward to just spreading the word about the book and then see you at the next stop on the book tour. Is there a book tour? There's a book tour.
Yeah, I'll make sure you get it. But yeah, thank
We
you again for this opportunity
thank
to
you.
share with you and your peeps, your
Yes.
audience. Thank you for extending your network for me in this way. I appreciate that. I don't take it lightly. And thank you for your support. And yeah, look forward. Yeah, people just reach out. If you can't find me, ask Marie. She'll get you connected to
You'll be
me.
connected. I already have some people. I'm like, you need to meet, this person. And so yeah, we'll be spreading the word and then just keep showing up. And that's the other
Yeah.
piece too, that first step and keep showing up. So thank you again.